This is John Groves coming to you from my home studio. Today's Bible talk features the raising of Lazarus. Short of the resurrection on the first Easter, the raising of Lazarus is perhaps the next greatest of Jesus' miracles. The story is found in the Gospel of John, chapter 11. Here, Jesus is told that his friend Lazarus is ill. Lazarus was the brother of Martha and Mary. They were part of a household in Bethany of Judea, just east of Jerusalem. The sisters had sent a message to Jesus to ask him politely if he could come, visit them, and possibly heal him. The message read, "Lord, him who you love is ill." In turn, Jesus commented, "This illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Instead of leaving right away to visit Lazarus and his sisters, Jesus, in the company of his disciples, decides to wait a couple of extra days where he was staying. After an interlude discussing travel during daytimes and nighttimes, Jesus tells his disciples that Lazarus has fallen asleep and he must go to awaken him. The disciples consider that if Lazarus is asleep, he will wake up naturally without Jesus needing to be present. The gospel writer adds that Jesus was talking about Lazarus' death. The author states, "Then Jesus told them plainly, 'Lazarus is dead. For your sake, I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him.'" By the time Jesus and his disciples arrive in Bethany, a large crowd has gathered at the siblings' home to console the surviving sisters. Martha learns of Jesus' arrival and meets up with him. She tells him that if he had arrived earlier, her brother would not have died. In turn, Jesus tells her that he will rise again. Martha agrees and adds that his rising will be at the resurrection on the last day. Jesus then declares, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" Martha agrees. She affirms that Jesus is the Messiah and then goes to get her sister. Mary then tells Jesus what Martha had said, that if he had been there earlier, Lazarus would still be alive. She then starts to cry. Jesus is moved by Mary's display of emotion, and he himself weeps. He then asks where Lazarus is buried. He instructs those nearby to remove the stone serving as the doorway to the tomb. Martha then interjects that the body of Lazarus, who has been dead 4 days, would emit a foul odor. Jesus then tells everybody, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" He then prays, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." Jesus then cries with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" And the dead man, garbed in grave clothes, emerges from the tomb. Jesus then instructs those around him to unbind and let him go. This account has been the subject of many artistic portrayals. I want to share with you the painting by Sebastiano del Piombo. This was the first item inventoried in the National Gallery in London's collection and is identified as NG1, where it now resides. It was part of a dual commission I mentioned during my last Bible talk. The painting reflects the mannerist style that was popular then. You can see it in the gesturing of the figures in the painting. You can readily identify Jesus, Lazarus, and the attendants removing the grave bindings, Martha avoiding the possible stench, and Mary at Jesus' feet. The crowd is either praising Jesus or indifferently trying to assess what has just happened. This artistic portrayal prompts viewers to consider whether they believe Jesus' claims about belief in him as the key to eternal life. Before making more headway in understanding this miracle story, I would like to digress for a moment and touch on two theological formulations. These concern the terms high and low Christology. High Christology refers to the perspective on the life of Jesus as divine in nature. One then has no difficulties accepting the many miracles that Jesus performed, including the raising of Lazarus and his own resurrection. Low Christology, on the other hand, emphasizes Jesus' humanity and his teachings and discounts to a degree the many miracles he performed. The Gospel of John, for example, views Jesus from a high Christological perspective. In turn, the Gospels of Mark and Luke tend to emphasize his teachings and his human existence. The original Gospel of Mark ends before an extension was added, possibly as early as the 2nd century, featuring Jesus' resurrection and his post-resurrection appearances, including the walk to Emmaus and his final ascension. With this background, what lessons should we draw from this extraordinary event? First, I think it only fair to mention that the dialogue in John with the words attributed to Jesus are meant as a message for later generations of Christians as creedal and fundamental. The dialogue is a bit too stilted to come across as a human portrayal of Jesus. I question whether it is reasonable for Jesus to wait until Lazarus has died before going to visit him. The ulterior purpose of proving the glory of God, as stated in our text, for the benefit of Christian believers, strike me as falling outside conventional social norms. The human traits the story exhibits concern different aspects of friendship. First, there are the delays we sometimes generate when we consider coming to a friend's assistance. Perhaps the problem, whatever it is, will resolve itself before we jump in with an offer of assistance. Second, it is all right to shed tears over the loss of a loved one, a good friend. And third, there is the role a good friend plays in a person's life. We know very little about Lazarus, but Jesus clearly found rest and comfort in the company of Lazarus and his sisters before and after the times he preached and taught in Judea. Jesus' tears manifest his empathy for the plight of Mary and Martha living without their brother, and perhaps even for his own loss of Lazarus' friendship. A good friend, after all, is an essential part of a life well lived. Charles Fillmore, in his Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, discusses Jesus' travel to see Lazarus as the arrival of I am consciousness, present to awaken a youthful outlook in a person who is otherwise asleep. In essence, Lazarus' experience represents a revitalization in the outlook and attitudes of those who desire and act to develop greater spiritual consciousness. He states, the outer senses say that this vitalizing force is dead, that it has been dead for so long that it has gone into dissolution, decay. But the keener knowledge of the spiritual man proclaims, our friend Lazarus is falling asleep, but I awaken him out of sleep. Bringing this sleeping life to outer consciousness is no easy task. Jesus groaned in spirit and was troubled at the prospect. The higher must enter into sympathy and love with the lower to bring about the awakening. Fillmore adds, in the course of removing the stone entry from the tomb, man essentially abandons the conventional beliefs in material laws and springs forth with the inner life. This reveals in consciousness the glory of spirit. Here we can discern Fillmore's metaphysical appreciation for high Christology manifesting itself in our Christ consciousness. Until next time, this is John Groves signing off.